Hi guys, Jamie from Boxing Life and welcome back to another boxing list video. In today's video, I'm going to be looking at 10 boxers who have had their father as their lead trainer. Having a family member in your corner can no doubt be one of the best things for a fighter, as no one knows you better than family, right? Well, that's not always the case with some fighters, as they can feel burdened to stay with their father instead of exploring new horizons to potentially improve. Personally, I think it has its pros and cons depending on the trainer and sometimes even the fighter. But today's video, I should hopefully highlight some of these issues and successes of fighters who have had their father in their corner. I've also done a mix of current and retired fighters. If I miss anyone out, let me know in the comments below. I might do a part 2 in the future. To spice things up and to have a bit of fun, I'll rank this list in accordance to how their careers went or is currently going with their father by their side. So on that note, let's get right into it. Number 10. Conor and Nigel Benn. Now, Nigel didn't train Conor for too long as he had moved to Australia with his family, but he did help out in his corner in his earlier career and outside the ring with his training. You can definitely tell Conor had adapted his father's warrior spirit since starting his pro boxing journey from a young age. Conor Benn's career has so far been successful to date, especially as a prospect coming up with not much amateur experience. But with Ben challenging and defeating former world champions and contenders right now, you can't deny his father's attitude must have helped Ben at some point. However, the majority of credit must go to current trainer Tony Sims, who has been really the one to mould Ben to who he is today. Number 9. Chris Eubanks Sr. and Jr. Now, if you know British boxing well, you will no doubt have heard of the Eubanks. When Chris Eubanks Jr. was coming up through the ranks, his very eccentric father Chris Eubanks Sr. was the one to guide and train his son. However, he did bring in the help of Ronnie Davies, Sr.'s former coach, but how much influence he had, I'm unsure. For me, it was always a strange relationship, with Eubanks Sr. claiming his son could be better than Floyd Mayweather.
People say I'm crazy, but take into consideration that I've been a former participant of this particular business, and I'm telling you that this man is going to be better than Floyd Mayweather Jr.
Now, we always want the best for your family, but giving delusional comparisons, it can be an extra burden on them to perform. So when the time has come for Eubanks Jr. to show up, that he is up there with the best, he is simply being outboxed or outperformed. Chris Eubanks Jr.'s last fight with his father in the corner, I believe, was his defeat to George Groves. He's since taken out other trainers instead, including Vasquez and more recently Roy Jones Jr., without any real results. We will only find out once, or if he faces top opposition one day again, if this will have really made a difference. Number 8. Teofimo Lopez Jr. and Sr. Now, this father-son coach relationship has recently been in the spotlight due to the terrible advice Sr. gave his son in the defeat versus George Kambosos Jr., with many people calling young Teo to move on from his father. I highly recommend you check out my recent breakdown video of the fight if you haven't seen it already. However, we can't forget the past, especially in terms of how Teofimo Sr. helped his son to become a world champion, and then go on to defeat former pound-for-pound star Lomachenko. Sr. has without a doubt given young Teofimo the belief to be the very best, but you can't let that get to your head. Lopez had a quick rise to the top, which has quickly been flipped on its head. Maybe it was an off night for Teofimo Sr. and Jr. There was also clearly issues on the lead up to the fight with Kambosos. There's also an element of underestimating your opponent, which you should never do. Time will tell if this one will work. Bill and Devin Haney. Devin Haney is another rising star in boxing, with him only being in his early 20s. From when I've published this video, the young champion has been guided very well throughout his amateur and now professional career. Despite getting his WBC world title handed to him in an email pretty much, you can't deny his talent and that he can be a superstar in the sport if he keeps performing the way he is. Interestingly, it was a joint decision by both of them to bring in another top trainer, which ended up being the highly regarded British trainer Ben Davidson. This is an interesting move to get another voice in the camp, which can only be beneficial in my opinion. However, with Bill still being the main man, you don't know how much impact another coach can make, or if they will conflict over tactics and approach. This is definitely another time will tell on how this relationship will end up. Number 6. Kenny and Sean Porter. Kenny had trained Sean throughout the majority of his amateur and professional career. Looking at some of the training footage, there's no denying how demanding he was on his son. You can tell Sean has complete respect for his father, and I suppose you would have to when he's talking to you the way he was. But no one will know Sean better than his father, and the strictness and hard work definitely came out in Sean Porter's boxing style. When you look back at Porter's career, they faced all the top welterweights, and you can't say they ducked anyone. Maybe this hardlined approach helped Sean get more success than he actually could have with another trainer. Number 5. Shane and Jack Mosley. Shane Mosley for the most part had a tremendous career, fighting pretty much everyone, including the likes of Oscar De La Hoya, Cotto, Canelo, Margarito, and many more. But a lot of his success as a fighter came from his father Jack Mosley's influence. Jack Mosley himself was a top amateur fighter in his younger days, and Shane Mosley has said he remembers the sacrifices his dad made growing up, from travelling to tournaments and spending money on gear to help his son fulfill his boxing potential. However, in his pro career, Shane decided to go a different route, changing trainers at one point. However, they did join up again for the rematch with De La Hoya, which was a controversial split decision. I thought this quote by Jack Mosley himself was interesting on the father-son topic. He said, "A lot of times fathers do not allow their sons to grow. They want to live their lives through their sons. Then you have people in the fighter's ear and the father's ear trying to manage things and manipulate. People are envious and jealous. They want the money. There are a lot of reasons why father-son combinations do not work." I think he makes a good point with this, as if you consider who I've mentioned already on this list, you could say they're using their sons for the limelight themselves. Number 4. Roy Jones Sr. and Jr. Roy Jones Sr. had trained Jr. from a very young age and was nothing but strict with his son when growing up. Roy Jones even said this himself about his father when he was younger. "I was in pain all day, every day. I was so scared of my father. He'd pull up his truck and start looking for something I'd done wrong. There was no escape, no excuse, and no way out of nothing." Senior would also put young Roy Jones against boys much older and bigger than he was. You could consider Roy Jones Sr. maybe felt he was doing the right thing by making his son tougher, but was that the right way to go about it? Maybe Roy wouldn't have been the fighter we know today if it wasn't for his father's actions. It all came to a head between the two after his father killed one of his dogs after an incident at his home when he was away. From that point on, it was the end of the relationship between the two. Number 3. Anatoly and Vasyl Lomachenko. Anatoly Lomachenko is very much the driving force behind his son's huge success. Sometimes known by boxing fans as Papachenko, he turned Lomachenko into arguably the greatest amateur boxer of all time, finishing with a 396-1 record, along with 2 Olympic gold medals at Beijing and London. Anatoly taught his son from a very young age, but before he could start boxing training, he attended traditional Ukrainian dance classes and even gymnastics before finally getting into the ring. Maybe this was an intention of Anatoly, so Loma's footwork would be perfect for boxing. Since turning professional, Lomachenko has become the fastest to win world titles in 3 weight divisions, with 2 defeats to date. Despite these 2 defeats, I can't see Loma ever leaving his father's side. Anatoly has also had a huge influence on not just his son, but Ukrainian boxers such as Usyk and Godzvik on the Ukrainian boxing team. Godzvik once said, "Lomachenko's father made this team. He created it. He's just too humble to say it." But it's true. Ask Usyk. It's not only about boxing. He's a psychologist, a leader. He says something and you believe in it, because everything he tells you, it works. For me, you can't deny the work he's done with his son Vasyl, but I'm sure they want to prove everyone wrong since the disappointing defeat versus Lopez. Number 2. Floyd Mayweather Sr. and Jr. During Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s dominant run over 2 decades that saw him become a 50-0 as a pro boxer and winning world titles in 5 weight divisions, Mayweather was very fortunate to have his father and uncle beside him during his career. Not only that, they were both professional boxers, who had huge influence on his defensive boxing style that has made him one of the best to ever lace them up. However, Floyd Sr. and Jr. had a very polarizing relationship at times.
Jealousy don't get you nowhere. What jealousy? Jealousy don't get you nowhere. Who is the best trainer right here? Hands down the best trainer. Who gives the care about who's the best trainer? You just said you were the best. So I am the best. No, you're not.
With Sr. serving a prison sentence from his teenage years, Floyd Mayweather Jr. was very much left on his own. In this period, he opted to train with his uncle Roger, who was a former world champion himself. Jr. explained why he decided to stay with his uncle recently. It wasn't really parting ways, that's what people don't know. My dad left me at the age of 16 when he went to prison. I was on my own from 16 till 19. I was working by myself. Then I started working under my uncle Roger, so it's always been in the family. I would work with my dad and my uncle Roger, so it wasn't like I was departing and leaving my father. The reason why I put Mayweather's at number 2 on this list, Sr. without a doubt gave young Floyd the boxing tools, education and fundamentals to get to the top. After Roger's health started to deteriorate in the later stages of his career, it was nice to see Floyd take up his father again. I also liked the moment between the two in his last proper fight against Berto.
Everything you taught me from day one. I always remember.
Everything working, baby. Everything working. Good.
Right, guys, thank you.
Hey, Floyd, be careful.
I got you.
Okay. All right, baby. Make sure everything good. All right, yes, sir.
Number 1, Joe and Enzo Calzaghe. The Italian Dragon, Joe Calzaghe, is the longest reigning super middleweight world champion in boxing history, having held the WBO title for over 10 years and defending the title against 20 opponents, while also unifying the titles before giving the light heavyweight division a chance in his last 2 fights. A big part of his success, however, was of course his father Enzo, who had no previous boxing experience growing up himself. It wasn't until he took up being a trainer at the Newbridge Boxing Club in Wales, now the Calzaghe Boxing Club. From here, he introduced his son Joe to the sport, knowing his son had the potential to be a world champion one day. Enzo wasn't just a one-off in my opinion as well. He also trained other famous Welsh fighters to world titles including Enzo Macronelli, Nathan Cleverly and Gavin Rees. However, his son was without a doubt his greatest success. Sadly, Enzo passed away in 2018. This for me has to be the best father-son duo in the sport, with multiple world title defences and also helping Joe finish with an incredible undefeated record of 46-0. And that wraps up this boxing list, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below who you thought was the best father-son duo. If I've missed anyone out, let me know in the comments below as well. I'll happily do a part 2. As always guys, if you enjoyed this, make sure to hit that like button. If you're new here, please subscribe. As always, I'll see you in the next one.